Well, there's a lot of great trees for whitetails, and I talked about bad trees for whitetails. We talk about hard maple, cherry, even beech. Although a beech crop is great to have on the land. It's a cool tree, but it's not. It provides very poor cover, very poor browse, and often the browse of a tree is more important than the mast crop, except when you get to chestnuts and soft mass that produce a lot of tonnage for you that can actually provide for deer for the entire season or most of the season. But when you just have white oaks dropping in late September and they're gobbled up by turkeys and deer by the middle and critters by the middle of October, it doesn't really offer enough to provide, although it is a good complement to trees or to your habitat. Now we're going to talk about these trees right here. See, like oak on here, I had it on my bad list and my good list, but it really depends on you. You don't want all of these typically. You don't want an entire 40 of any one of these. Then you don't have that diverse enough habitat. Deer are creatures of edge. Most wildlife relate to edge, whether it's grouse, rabbits, pheasants, whatever it might be, they're more creatures of edge. And the more you find edge, the more you find diversity, the more wildlife you find. First one I'll talk about is aspen. Now there's popple, aspen, and then there's poplar. Poplar, tulip poplar, that's a different type of tree. That's a seed tree. That's different than the trees that spread from a lateral root system like a popple or an aspen. And people use those three terms interchangeably all over the place. Aspen, the big tooth aspen, quaking aspen, that's what most people are referring to. That is all one clone of each other. It's an interconnecting root system. So when you cut those trees and you have to completely cut them, you cut clear cut pockets, you get sunlight, and they produce up to 7,000 shoots per acre. I've heard even 8,000. That's all wildlife food and cover for the first several years. It's an incredibly important tree in the northern areas of our country because that's what provides great cover, great food for grouse, snowshoe rabbits, and then also deer. So without those, in most locations where they're prevalent, you would significantly reduce or eliminate wildlife populations if you did not have that regenerating surplus of aspen in the area. They're very short-lived tree, 40 to 60 years. What's great about that is they're ready to cut often, and that keeps your wildlife populations high. If you have large areas on your property, it's great to establish thirds or quarters, strip those out as it relates to your habitat movements, and cut those every 5 to 7 years and then start over again. You can cut them down with a forestry head or forestry mulch or fecon machine where you can cut those down, create regeneration pockets, and use those as a renewable resource so that you can continue that. So aspen's a great tree, and I'm not sure these are in really number one order because you look down here, cedar is so critical in northern deer yards. So it's, some of our favorites. You can see down number 10 down here. I cherry picked the 9 best and easiest ones, and I told Dylan before I shot this he had to come up in number 10. So Dylan, are you almost ready?
Ready.
Okay, ready. I'll wait a while though, but you can still think about it if you're not. He might just be saying that, I don't know. But anyways, number 2, soft maple. Soft maple deer love to browse on, and they're great for hinge cutting if you have medium-sized, small, 6, 5, 4-inch diameter trees, 3-inch diameter trees, and they can live for decades. Very easy to cut. They're very easy to manipulate with a habitat hook. Hinge cutting tool, Nick Nation offers those from Michigan. They're the best tool that I know of, one of the only ones that I know of in the entire country. But they're great for hinge cutting. They offer prolific, favorable browse, and they can create hinge cuts that last for decades. A very important tree. Box elder. This is one we can go out right out here by the woods, just right by the house here, and you can see deer walking by and feeding on the tips of box elder trees. They're prolific. They grow very fast. They're great regenerators, and they provide that really all-important browse because you need great food plots, but you have to have good browse in your woods. Good browse comes from aspen regeneration, red maple, box elder. Those are some of my favorites for creating browse. We can throw ash right up there too. So it gives you high stem counts per acre, whether it's coming out of the stump or it's coming out of the root system like aspen or poplar or popple. See, I get those mixed up too. So they're all kind of flow together. That's why a lot of people just say aspen, that's easiest. But bottom line is, they're a necessary tree because they provide that hardwood browse and regeneration that deer have to have in their bedding areas twice during the day. That can also come from briars, woody shrub tips, weeds, grasses, whatever it might be that they can nibble on during the day by their bedding areas. but bottom line is they need it, and those trees provide a great amount of it. Red cedar. Red cedar I really like. Now, what's nice about red cedar is it's ultimate cover tree. It's almost like switchgrass or conifer stands. Deer love to rub them. I love watching those big giant, or looking at a big giant rub on a red cedar that's been hacked by a monster buck. Red cedar is great because they're prolific in areas, and you can take an area that's 40 acres of almost all red cedar. You can eliminate half of it. You can spray it to keep it removed. And then you can plant hardwood regeneration, early successional growth you can allow to happen in those areas. Now you have the base cover of cedar, and then you have the ultimate regeneration and browse that deer need during the day and wildlife needs in the form of edge and diversity. The worst thing you do is take 40 acres, and I've seen this, take 40 acres, remove all the red cedar, all 40 acres of red cedar, and then windrow hardwood tree tubes in there for basically boards per foot in the future that really don't grow into any type of wildlife cover. You eliminated 50% of the cover that you could have used to your advantage. It's okay to eliminate the other 50. And we're talking about leaving that surrounding area surrounded by, or that area surrounded by red cedar, creating those pockets of red cedar on the inside, and then taking out another 50% that you actually allow hardwood regeneration to take place. But then you have that edge, and you have that cover the red cedar provides. I love red cedar hillside pockets around deer. They're often dominated by hardwood. They won't grow in those big hardwood stands, but they're off to the side, and it's crazy how many deer will live on that edge where they have the ultimate cover of the red cedar, thermal protection, snow hindrance cover. They love to rub on it again, those bucks, but then it's right next to hardwood regen and diversity. It can be a great complement to otherwise existing already deer habitat. Oak. Oak is a great complement to good browse properties. When you already have good browse, you already have that hardwood regeneration, briars, woody shrub tips, whatever it might be for browse, oak is a great complement. Oak is not a good tree by itself. I've unfortunately seen foresters and forestry recommendations where we take this pocket of oak, we thin out all the red maple and aspen, we actually girdle them, kill them, hack and squirt. Now you're left with just pure oak. You have no cover, no browse during the day, and the deer live on your neighbors along with all the other wildlife that probably died because you eliminated the good tree species within the oak. Oak is a complement to good habitat. It is not good habitat by itself. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And that's why it's on my bad list of trees, because when you have an all oak stand that's been managed for oak, you're going to have one of the biggest wildlife deserts in the entire area where deer and other wildlife stay off your land during the daylight, except for squirrels. Chestnut. Chestnut is a great prolific provider. It doesn't replace food plots because food plots provide necessary green and moisture that deer crave. So the combination of both would be great. But when you get into the northern regions in Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, northern Pennsylvania, even northern portions of Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, it can be difficult to grow chestnuts. The problem is there's companies out there, there's one I see on Instagram all the time, why plant food plots when you can have chestnuts? Well, that applies to certain areas of the country, especially Missouri, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, southern Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee. I've seen some great groves of chestnuts down in southern Indiana, southern Ohio. But that's not appropriate to tell someone that in central Wisconsin, central Minnesota. It's slow growing. If they're exposed to the northwest winds, they'll die and frost out. And so a lot of people that are buying chestnuts every year don't have chestnuts. I've seen chestnut groves. I've been at a chestnut farm where they actually have commercial chestnut production down in southern Ohio. So there's some great opportunities for chestnuts, but know where they belong, and they are an outstanding tree. They can provide a lot of tonnage, more than apples, soft mass crab apples. They are really cool, and they can be a complement to a great food plot system. But you never want it as by itself, and you don't want to plant it in the wrong location. But it can be an incredible complement, more of a complement to food plots than oaks are to great browse. That great browse you need, you can have a great property with great food plots, really good browse, early successional growth on, and that can be a great property by itself, and the oaks are a complement to that. Chestnuts are a huge complement to your food source. You can actually eliminate food plot acres, a portion of them, when you have chestnuts, because they can provide that necessary amount of food and tonnage that deer need and crave to be able to build a deer herd on your property. Soft mass. Again, a great complement to food plot systems. You don't want to have only soft mass apples, crab apples, pears, persimmons, whatever they might be, pawpaws. You don't want that to be your only food source because it's very limited, but it can be an outstanding complement to a good food plot program. I like putting apple trees, conifers on the north side of food plots. So you're providing quality food with quality food, or on the approach side by stand location. So you might have a thin area around a corner of a big food plot where you have a bunch of apple trees and deer hitting those apple trees on the way to food. Maybe it's an open field stop or pasture area that you're redoing. You're providing switchgrass, pollinator blends, and you have a grove of apple trees next to a big oak where you can put a tree stand and watch this apple orchard as deer are on the way to food plots in the distance. You know, a really good bow hunting spot. You don't want to have a bow hunting spot on a big food source. Apple trees are that perfect complement where deer are just feeding on the way through. You'll notice out here we have a lot of apple trees surrounding most of our food plots, and that's a great addition to the food, but it's not the food by itself. But soft mast trees, apple trees are outstanding. Cedar, white cedar. We talk about red cedar up here. White cedar is a lot different. Red cedar is prickly. Has it's a different smell than white cedar. White cedar is very difficult to get to grow. Red cedar is easy to get to establish and grow, to grow just about anywhere. They've even taken white cedar deer yards and they've replanted with white cedar and it dies, even with being caged. They don't understand why. And I've heard this from someone who manages deer yards up in the UP in Michigan. They don't know if it's the water, the soil, the acidic level that changes. They've tried to test it, but where deer yards were established late 1800s, early 1900s, the soil conditions have changed so that cedar won't grow now, and then other areas they have cedar regenerating. So it's a very difficult tree to establish, but count yourself lucky if you have it on your property. It's a preferred yarding area. Up in the UP of Michigan, deer will travel 15, 20 miles to get to cedar deer yards that were established in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It becomes a green barn. Not a lot of food in there. Those mature bucks, mature does, they can reach food. I've even been in a deer yard in Engadine, Michigan, and found the back hoof of the toes and dew claws hanging off the ground about 2.5 to 3 foot of what it looked like about a 1.5-year-old doe, a yearling doe, just hanging there as it got its front leg caught between a cedar tree as it was, with deep snow, was trying to get some more food up there. Probably died a horrible death. But at the same time, it shows the necessity of cedars and those cedar yards. It provides escape cover. I've been to, when I used to do real estate appraisals, I've been to a borrower's house where they have open hardwoods. They put hay out for the deer, and then they end up shooting 85 predators during the year with a 223 sitting right by the window, so they could pick off the coyotes that were out in the yard coming at the deer, even the deer running like a wave around the house at night and their yard light coming on, blood on the porch or deck, because deer were trying to get away from the predators. It's simply because they were pulled from the deer yards. They need to be in those deer yards. It's snow hindrance cover, so it's less snow under the cedars, offers thermal protection, and then they establish a network of trails so they can get away. The winters already kill 50% of all fawns in the UP of Michigan, which is about 50,000 fawns. That's the mortality rate is 50%. Those deer yards without those cedar, they die. There was an area in the Rock, Michigan, where they eliminated the cedar, big cut over. They cut the cedar out of a deer yard. The deer the next year went to that same cedar yard where they had for generations and they've been taught those ways. They just stood there and died. They said the biologists wouldn't even go in there. It stunk so bad in the springtime to even count deer. That's how important those deer yards are up north. You can't just eliminate them. They're a very important species, and if you have them on your property, they can be an outstanding addition to your whitetail and wildlife habitat. And then hemlock. Some of my favorite areas to hunt in the rolling federal lands of Pennsylvania, where I've hunted around the Allegheny Reservoir since 1993, are those hemlock flats and bottoms. I always like to hunt the edge of those. I'm giving away some secrets, but there are areas I love hunting in the hardwoods, some of the certain funnels and benches and saddles that are up top, but they all relate to hemlock bottoms and deer going from one stand of hemlocks to the other. When the goings get nasty, when the weather is nasty, when it's really windy, when it's really snowy, those deer flock to those hemlocks, and that represents that form of quality cover on public land, similar to those white cedar yards. If you find a hemlock blowdown in those areas, the deer will flock to it to eat those tender nips or tips of those shoots and branches of the hemlock. I found that if you don't have vines in an area, a lot of times you have a hemlock branch, it can be a great replacement for a hanging vertical vine in those areas. So really, these are my favorite trees right here. You know, from Aspen, poplar. Poplar's a little bit different. Not browsed that much by deer, but that Aspen regeneration is so tough. And then all the way down here to Hemlock. And then Dylan, you want to come over here and talk about it?
Yeah, sure.
I noticed Dylan's Webke fur hat. That's kind of jealous. I need to get one of those.
Good
we have
spot.
Webke furs.
And I'm like, you know what? I got to rep this brand. Great little shop in the La Crosse area.
Yeah, we like those little mom and pop shops. It's an incredible gun store. And so I bought guns there this year. I bought scopes there this year. I buy ammo there. And so I give them quite a bit of money. They're really nice when you go in there.
It's
the guys.
Cool that they have ammo too. So
oh my gosh! Oh, they've been pretty scarce, but yeah, it's a pretty cool little company if you guys haven't heard of it. But anyways, Dylan, what's your number 10?
I'm gonna take it away with number 10 here. I'm thinking about long-term cover. If you need to add it to your property, I like spruce for that. You know, breaking up vision, adding thermal cover, that sort of thing. You can talk about white spruce. If you're in areas that are more shaded, if you're adding it into you know, hardwoods, that sort of thing, and if you're planting a row of it for either a windbreak or screening, you're looking at more Norway spruce in those open areas.
Yeah,
I like both those trees a lot. You can buy them in bulk pretty easily every year, depending on where you're at. And I planted a bunch in my yard last year. I did a mix of Norway and white spruce, and it's pretty fun watching. You know, and knowing that, you know, in 10 years or so, I'm going to have a great visual barrier that, you know, will actually provide some cover and hopefully get some rabbits bedding.
Yeah.
Or, you know, not bedding, but have
well, they do.
cover.
They go under the cover.
Yep. They'll. We have no rabbits in my yard right now, so I actually did what we're doing today. Put some pellets out, threw some brush on them, and then surrounded them with spruce. So in a few years, hopefully they'll be in there. Well,
and what I like about them too is, you look at white spruce, like Dylan was saying, I've seen arguments online of what's better, white spruce or Norway spruce. So one's for more shady, white spruce is for shady, poor soil areas. It'll grow just about anywhere. And then Norway spruce typically needs heavier soil, which is more typical of ag, and then open sunlight. They both can grow in the right conditions with getting sunlight 1.5 to 2 foot per year. The leader's coming up, and I would add white pine in there. I know a lot of times when we're creating cuttings,
but I think that these are a little bit more white spruce in Norway. I think are a little bit more full-bodied as they're younger and fill out a lot better than white pine. Whereas, you know, obviously white pine has a lot of value later in its life when it comes to timber and that sort of thing. So it's definitely pros and cons.
Well, I like that. It's good additions.
Awesome.
But anyways, I hope you like this top 10 list. I hope you know, the cool thing is if you can find just about all these trees that take place on one spot, that's the representative of diversity. And a lot of these won't mix together. Typically, you're not mixing conifers with hardwoods. They're grown separately. Just like we talk about, you know, more red cedar, spruce, Norway spruce, white spruce, those are more cover trees, hemlock. And then you have solid trees off the side. That's no different than, you know, hardwood off the side, aspen, regeneration, briars. That's no different than if we're taking a field and putting switchgrass here in solid pockets, allowing that to grow for pure cover, and then you have food source, shrubs, trees, or plantings over the side that provides actually food and browse. So similar to woods, just on a bigger scale and bigger plantings. So these are some trees. If you can get them all to happen in one spot or a large number, you're going to have great cover and food value for not only whitetails, but all forms of wildlife. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.